Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we have two eminent dignitaries here, and we are delighted after the speech of Mr. Suresh Garg, and it will be my absolute honor to invite our guest of honor and chief guest for the awards ceremony today. But before I call Madam on stage, I would like to say a few words about Ms. Inoshi Sharma, currently the Executive Director from Food Safety Standards Authority of India. Ms. Sharma is a civil servant, an officer of the Indian Revenue Service. She has held various assignments pertaining to enforcement of publicity of tax provisions, international taxations, and appellate tribunal. She has worked as the Director for National Health Mission in Haryana, looking after the procurement of drugs and equipment and also adolescent health. Her current assignment as the Executive Director for Food Safety Standards Authority of India involves regulatory compliance, Eat Right India initiative, and extending support to scaling up of fortification across the country. She has interest in the area of public policy making, administrative and social sector. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the honorable guest of honor for today's evening and the award ceremony, Ms. Inoshi Sharma, Executive Director from Food Safety Standards Authority of India. I would humbly request ma'am to say a few words before we start with the lamp lighting. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I would really like to congratulate the organizers for having such a wonderful audience here and so many people from the food business sector. You know, for the FSSAI, it's always a great privilege to be able to join such occasions and also, you know, to showcase some of the work that we've been doing and, of course, hear some of the concerns that the industry also has. You know, for us, of course, as you all are aware, the first and foremost activity is to lay down science-based standards. And when these standards are made, it is not just the FSSAI or the FSSAI officials which are making the standards. It's actually scientific panels. We've got 21 scientific panels who actually end up making these regulations. So when you consider any food item for which you are taking a license, that food item and the way it is made or the ingredients that are used, they are all determined by a scientific panel in terms of the safety of the ingredients that are going in. So a lot of you must have looked at the FSSAI website, and on that you must have seen the FOSCOS. The FOSCOS is where you actually log in for your license or your registration. So that's like your first point of contact for the FSSAI, right? So over a period of time, we've actually made that very process of getting a license, getting it renewed, making a modification, or continuing with the payments, we've sort of simplified it over a period of time. That has been one of the tasks of FSSAI in terms of the ease of doing business and how we can, make it really, really simple. When we think about, the second aspect, I mean, when you go to the second step, so you've got your license and you've started your production. What kind of a production process are you involved in? What kind of raw materials are you getting? So one of the concerns that we have in FSSAI is a lot of raw materials which companies are picking up today, they have pesticides in them. And that is a concern a lot of FBOs have raised with us. But this is something that we're very clear about in FSSAI, that when you are procuring your raw material, you have to be careful with respect to the MRLs. There are a lot of times products that we pick up. For instance, I could just give a random example of spices. Pesticides are found. Most FBOs will say we do not add pesticides. Of course you don't. But the fact that the raw material has it and therefore the end product has is something of a concern, and that is something that food businesses have to make sure. The second thing is, I mean, we had a session on dairy just before I walked in. Another concern is regarding the kind of animal feed our dairy industry is getting. Now, animal feed does not come under FSSAI, but animal feed becomes one area from which the aflatoxin comes into the milk. And whenever samples of milk are lifted, aflatoxin is found. Another issue which I'm sure as an industry people would be aware is the AMR. So if you're in any kind of industry dealing with animal products, AMR is again an issue. Antibiotics resistance is coming. So these are again issues which are not directly, say, concerning, a food business immediately when they are procuring the raw material, but it affects the end product. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to sort of just highlight why this becomes important. The third aspect comes is, once you've made your product, you are going to package it into something, right? What kind of packaging material are you using? That is one area of concern. And if you're an FBO or a food business who has a range of products, is extremely popular, chances are, duplicate or you could say adulterated products of your product would be available. I mean, recently in Gujarat, there was a raid which was conducted, and for a very popular brand of ghee, we found, sort of a replica being made. And what was very good about the main food business was that when they were printing the date of manufacture expiry date, they were doing half of it on the paper and half of it on the package material, right? Now, but when the people who were adulterating it and they were making the duplicate thing, when they were doing it, they were not particularly aware of it. That's how we could really catch it. But that is something of a matter of concern. What the FSSAI really requests food businesses and associations is, a lot of times you will be aware of, areas where, say, your products are being duplicated. Please do provide us with this information. We have carried out extremely successful enforcement activities in which we have tackled with such areas of work which are not obviously within the rules. Now, the other aspect which I wanted to talk about when you think about production and all is when your products are going for exports. Now, as you're all aware, the EU is extremely stringent. So no matter what levels or standards we have in our country, what laboratory tests you are doing, unless you have a certain standard over there, you will not be allowed to export your products. Now, why that becomes a matter of concern is, and very well as Mr. Garg was mentioning, social media is playing such a big role today that if anything is happening in the domestic market, no matter what kind of news comes out, it is going to affect the export of that entire sector. So even if you are not directly involved in that particular food item being exported, your product, because of a bad name which is floating in the social media, is going to get affected. Again, as an example, I must take up spices. Because what happened was, no country actually banned spices. It was just a recall of a certain lot. But what was being floated in the social media was, कि spices India के ban हो गए हैं. And a lot of food businesses who come to our office, who are not from the spice industry, were asking us the same question, क्या ban हो गया है? So what I would request all of you is, a lot of information when it comes out on social media is not correct. And as associations, you must also make the effort of coming out with immediately a statement saying that this is not right, or create some kind of an awareness among people so that there is no panic. The same thing happened with another very leading brand with respect to the health drink. There was an entire controversy which went on regarding health drink and being very high in sugar. Now, nobody bothered to, come out in the social media to say that at the back of the pack, very clearly the ingredients are mentioned. And nowhere in the FSSAI is there any category called a health drink. It was just on the e-commerce platform that it was being sold under the category of a health drink. So this was just a concern that I wanted to highlight, that, platforms like these provide you with an opportunity to sort of network, create your mini associations, and just be aware of what's happening in the social media. Of course, when we are talking about products, I also wanted to highlight that this is also the time when the consumer has become extremely sensitive. And with a population of something like 1.4 billion, we are not just catering to one market. Within that market, there are layers of markets. And we have now a lot of people who have become extremely aware of the kind of product they are consuming. So it becomes extremely sensitive for us also as a food business to understand, does the product have high levels of fat, salt, or sugar. Because as you're aware, we have recently come out with an advisory telling food businesses that you must put in bold the total fat, salt, and sugar to highlight it so that whenever consumers are picking up a packet, they know what they are consuming. So this is something that really needs to be taken care of. Another very big segment or a new segment, a niche segment is on fortified staples. We have regulations with respect to wheat, rice, oil, milk, and salt. And this is still a niche market. We already have a government program in which under the public distribution system, we are providing fortified rice to over 800 million people. But in the open market, there are very few players. So if as food businesses, you find that interesting, I would request you to take it forward because fortified products provide us with essential micronutrients like iron, B12, folic acid, vitamin A, vitamin D. And that is something a lot of people in our country are suffering from in terms of malnutrition, if you were to say. One very interesting area of work now is the AI and how AI can be adopted, at least to start it by the large businesses. Now, when we talk about food safety, food safety is not just about making sure just in terms of, say, the safety in terms of the production chain or just providing once in a while training to the food handlers. It's also about making sure each and every batch, what ingredient went in, when was it manufactured, what procedure of recalls do we have for any item which gets expired. So interestingly, in FSSAI recently we got hold of another case in which a leading brand had in fact sold their expired product to somebody to make it into animal feed. That person unfortunately recycled it and sold it in the market. Such instances happen. So if food businesses need to really take care that when you are disposing of with your expired products or any of your products which are not following quality standards, make sure it is destroyed completely. Do not just hand it over because again it will give you a bad name because again the trace when it happens, your company does come into the picture. So use of AI, how do you make sure inventory management is more stringent? How do you make sure the compliances to the FSSAI regulations are taking place? How do you make sure you internally have checks and balances? That is something that can be worked on. So these were just some of my thoughts. Thank you so much for your patient listening.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that wonderful, gesture. And thank you so much for your wonderful speech. A big round of applause once again. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Inoshi Sharma, Executive Director from Food Safety Standards Authority of India. We are very delighted and very grateful to have your presence here today. Ma'am, a small token of appreciation from our side for you.